I'm going to go to a question that we received from a good friend of Colonel Lee's and mine. He served with us in the Republic of Korea. He's a Korean defense veteran. It's Brigadier General William King, and his question is to all the panel members. And he starts by first thanking you for your service and your continued support. And his question is, given what you hear and see of our U.S. presence around the world today, especially with issues with staying or removing troops from Afghanistan, what advice would you give our leaders on the importance of remaining closely tied and deployed in South Korea to maintain peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula and Asian regions? And it's open to all of you. If anyone has a response to that, we'd be interested to hear.
Well, I would say that I'm not really in a position to qualify to answer that question, but from my research and just common knowledge that we know, there is an important necessity for the United States to remain in South Korea, because we know what could possibly turn out should there any conflict develop, and possibly us having just basically World War III. That's to the extent that I could answer that question.
And all that sort of stuff.
No.
Okay.
Bob or Earl, any thoughts?
No. No, but one thing about it, I found out I am 89 years old now, and I had to stay active. When I moved up there where I used to live, and all, and everything, and I had a lot of lawns. I had 21 lawns. I had one that took me six hours to cut, and I tell you, but in August the 22nd last year, things hit me bad. I drove myself all the way to the VA hospital with my heart thumping, and I thought my life was gone. And so I had still working for 2 customers. So at age 89, I had to give that up and everything. So that has really been something, but I'm still here for some reason.
You sound 89 years young, not old, and yeah. I've got 2 other questions from our audience. This question is for Bob. From I don't know if it's your son or grandson, but he said, "Did you ever fight or work alongside South Korean forces, or were you so far removed from the front lines that you never got a chance to link up with them?"
I thought it was a great mistake to sprinkle South Korean soldiers into our U.S. platoons because of the language problems. And the Army did that very heavily in the early years of the Korean War. The language issue was a great burden for each side. I remember clearly that when we set a password for the night, you know, when you wanted to challenge somebody, we tried to use something with the letter R in it, like Red Rider. And if you issued a challenge and you got the answer, well, you didn't know whether somebody was saying Red Rider or whether it was a North Korean doing his best to imitate the password for the night. And it just to me, didn't work out well. In the very early years of the Korean War, the South Korean regiments, South Korean army units could not be depended on, and they would give way very easily under assault from the North Koreans and then later the Chinese. And it created a real problem for the higher ups in the US Army. Can we depend on this particular South Korean unit standing its ground and holding the ground? And it took several years before the South Korean Army turned into a really effective fighting unit.
Well, a couple thoughts. First, the program that you were talking about still resides inside the alliance, and it's called the Katusa program, the Korean augmentation to the United States Army. And as we talked about before, the U.S. Army was challenged to get replacements into the frontline units quick enough. It was both the tyranny of time and having to deal with the war without fully mobilizing the U.S. military. And so very few countries that I know of would trust the leadership of another country's army to put their back then sons in the same units. And the Katusa, of course, there are different experiences with them. My experience up through today has been they were very competent. They fought bravely. There were language challenges, but they also brought an appreciation for the culture and the terrain, and what some of the other cultural aspects that were important for the U.S. Army to understand. As you all know, the U.S. Army's initial success fighting the North Koreans and initially the North Koreans, wasn't all that good either. And the Task Force Smith that was undertrained, undermanned, and underequipped had challenges meeting some of the rigors of the surprise and the well-trained and well-equipped North Korean forces. So success and failure in combat during the Korean War was shared by all units and by all the sending states. So I appreciate your personal experience. My experience over the many years, most recently from 2012 to 2016, and my experience with many armies around the world. After serving 39 years in Europe and around the world, that today, Bob, one of the finest armies and finest militaries that I've served with is the South Korean Army. And they've learned from all those experiences like we have, and they built an incredibly well-equipped, well-manned, and well-trained force. And I think few Americans understand that the Republic of Korea has mandatory service, and so they've learned the importance of that experience well, and they have an army that's unrivaled by many that I've served with. So thanks for those insights. We've got another question that came in, and it is an anonymous person that said, can you tell us what it was like when you first came home from Korea? So Earl, we'll start with you. When you had mentioned it briefly, but can you tell us what it was like when you first came home from Korea? What were your kind of, first impressions and first experiences?
Well, when I first came home, it was a different life again, and all, but going back to work, and trying to, and so that's what happened to me and all, and but I know I keep busy and going, because if I don't, I can't give up. I got to keep on moving. And so I learned a lot from that. So that's what happened to me, I'm still here for that reason. And so that was it.
Yeah, thank you, Earl. Bob, anything from you? I mean, your first impression, what was it like when you first got home? And I mean, what couldn't you wait to do, or what couldn't you wait to forget?
Do you want to
Well,
share?
obviously, my family was delighted to have me home. But in general, and at that time, I was living in a fairly small town in Massachusetts. It was as though, oh, Bob, haven't seen you in a while. Where have you been? People didn't understand. Hey, I'd been in the army. I was in Korea. I fought. Really? So, and then I went off to college. So it was as though people were totally unaware that the US was sending forces overseas, was pulling up reservists and sending them off to Korea.
Yeah, that's a great point. It was called and still referred to as a forgotten war. And as a nation, I think we were, after World War II, I think we were fatigued. So I think it added to this experience that those that fought in the Korean War, that it wasn't well understood. It wasn't necessarily well appreciated. Americans wanted to get on with their lives. And as Earl said, when he came back to, West Virginia, and he was expected to get on with his life. So that's a great insight. Jorge, if you could talk to your grandfather about his experiences, what kind of conversation would you have with him?
Oh, thank you. Yes. It would be a very, very long conversation. Obviously, I would ask him just his experience in general, especially as one from the native island from Puerto Rico, and how that experience was. But in short, I was just on a very personal level, and in closing, I would just thank him for his service, tell him I'm proud of him, and tell him that his brothers have become my saviors. And because of it, I'm a better man, a better husband, better father, and just thank him.
That's great. We've got another question from a colleague I talk to occasionally. He's a reporter for the Korean Voice of America Korean Service, Dong-Hyun Kim. And again, he wants to thank you for your service. And as a grandson of a South Korean War veteran, he says, I recall my grandfather saying that there's no place in every river, rice field in the peninsula where Korean U.S. blood wasn't spilled. Let me say that again. It's pretty profound, and I didn't do it justice. He said there is no place in every river, in every valley river or rice field in the peninsula where Korean and U.S. blood wasn't spilled. Having said that, there was a recent news from South Korea that the Arrow Hill evacuation project, where potentially 120,000 souls are still unaccounted for, have been terminated due to North Korea for 2.5 years not responding to cooperate. In other words, the ability to recover the remains of those missing in action and those killed in action. I was wondering, this is his question, I was wondering if you could share your thoughts why accounting for all the killed in action and missing in action in the Korean War has a very significant meaning. And Jorge, let's start with you.
Can you repeat that question again, please?
there is an area in North Korea. South Korea has not been given, the Republic of Korea has not been given the cooperation for the U.S. and the Republic of Korea to go in and recover the potential remains of both killed in action and missing in action.
Right.
And so the question is, how important is the accounting for those that were both killed and missing in action? How important is that to account for those lost souls?
That is, you put it so well, lost souls. It's just a very vital component of completely closing a chapter of that area and that era in time. And more importantly, for the family members and for those still living today, we have to retrieve every body part, every individual that is still out there. So it is extremely important.
Mr. Grandfield, Bob, any thoughts on?
Yeah, I was about to say, I would like to add a comment. I can remember an incident very early in my service there when the cold weather, this would be in either late November or early December 1950. I was riding with a couple of buddies, and I can't remember why we were moving equipment, but we were in what was the old expression in the Army about the truck, the two bys? What was the term that was used for the?
Deuce and a half. They were
half.
called a deuce and a half, yeah. It's a two and a half ton truck, so they call it a deuce and a half.
Thank you. That's what I was thinking of. I can remember I was with the driver and one other soldier, and we were going on some, when I say routine mission, to collect supplies of some sort. We came across two bodies, and even though there was active combat at the time, not within the next 200 yards, but in an area where there clearly had been a lot of combat in the very recent days, we were under orders, if possible, pick up any dead GIs. So we stopped, and there were two men there. One was a colonel in the US Marines, not a very large man, actually fairly small in stature, but he had been shot right across the chest. You could see it through his uniform, dead as could be. And the other was a great big Marine private. Because it was so cold, each body was stiff and frozen, and we had great difficulty lifting up the Marine private because he was such a big man and getting him into the back of the truck. And I thought to myself, you know, this is really combat. People are dying. And when you die in combat, you're dead. That made a great impression on me. So it may sound silly, but it made a great impression on me. Both a Marine colonel and a Marine private.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It doesn't sound silly to me. That's for sure. And I think we all, Jorge stated it well. I think we all want an accounting for those that went to another country, another region to fight, to bring them home. And we hope they can resolve this and continue with the work to do that. Earl, we got a question from you, from our audience. It says, Earl, thank you for your service. Have you ever visited Korea after you came home? How did you like it? Do you associate with any Koreans in your area? And it's from Hubert Hugh from Draper, Utah.
No, I haven't been back over to Korea, but there's a lot of things that took place over there that, that it's, and like when we had that sea ration food, and corned beef hash wasn't my style and all, and to eat, and the how everybody over there. Well, we had stuck over there, and so I couldn't come home until my time was up and everything. But it was quite a big difference. It got 45 below zero, but at my time it wasn't quite that 45, but it was cold enough, and and it was a lot different getting back home. I was really glad to get back home,
Yes, indeed.
Bob, have you had a chance to go back?
No, I have not. And to be perfectly honest, I have no desire to go back.
But
speaking about the cold, Earl, do you remember that in the very early months, we did not have sleeping bags?
Right.
The Army issued 4 blankets to each GI. And you would ordinarily think to yourself, gee, 4 blankets, no matter how cold the night is, have 4 blankets, you can keep yourself warm. Well, you really can't. With frozen ground, do you put 2 blankets under you and 2 on top? Or do you put 1 and then 3 on top? Believe me, my buddy, I forget my best buddy's name, and I used to huddle up like 2 lovers, trying to keep a little bit of warmth for each guy. And we finally, in early January, the Army issued sleeping bags, good quality sleeping bags, which was a huge improvement. So it was much better than those silly blankets.
I absolutely cannot imagine having endured a few winters in Korea myself, how you ever survive with just 4 blankets. To me, that's absolutely amazing. It speaks more of your Constitution, the Constitution of the American and South Korean and fighting man. I'm sorry you don't want to go back, Bob. The Republic of Korea, their equivalent of our Veterans Affairs, it's called the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, which I think is a fantastic title for a VA, Patriots and Veterans Affairs. They have a program that they still run, that they selflessly run, that I witnessed firsthand when I served there. It's called the Visitation Program. And they bring back, and they've done this for years, they bring back veterans and the veterans' families back, and they treat them like royalty. And my experience is they do it for a couple different reasons. One is to demonstrate their appreciation, their gratitude for the service and sacrifice that the sending states, primarily let's be honest, the U.S. Did. So they want to express their gratitude. They also want to demonstrate firsthand the pride for what they've done with the opportunity that you and Earl and other veterans who spilt blood and gave their lives, what they've turned that country into. And we call it the miracle on the Han. It is remarkable. It's the 10th largest economy in the world, and they didn't squander any of it. And they through hard work and the gratitude for the opportunity they've given, they've built this incredible democratic country that is a close ally to us. So, just a short advertisement for the program. It still exists. You get to go with members of your family, and you're treated not only with total respect, but first class. All the accommodations, everything you see, just demonstrates their appreciation and the beauty of this country. I mean, it's remarkable. It's having lived there nearly 5 years, late in my career, and after I left the U.S. Army, Seoul and Public Korea is Seoul's beautiful. So please reconsider it. And if you'd like information on how you or your family might be available to go through this visitation program, we can facilitate that at KDVA, and you can get a hold of Colonel Lee or his staff, and we can facilitate that.
Sir, may I respond?
Absolutely. This is a dialogue.
It's not that I have a dislike of South Korea. I think the South Korean people and government have done an amazing job of building a country from where it was in 1950. I tip my hat to South Korea on that point. And they are living in a dangerous part of the world with their North Korean neighbors. And in spite of being surrounded really by possible threats, South Korea has done an amazing job of building a stable democracy. And I tip my hat to them for so doing. Indeed, I tip my hat because within the 3 years after I had long since left South Korea and the war in South Korea, the South Korean army had turned into, from all reports, a very effective fighting unit. But one silly question I will now ask. I have always regarded the U.S. Army as an amazingly efficient organization. So why couldn't we get dry socks when we needed them?
Right.
We had ammunition and fuel and food, but no dry socks.
Bob, that was spoken like a true soldier. And you'll be disappointed to find out that even today, soldiers never have enough dry socks.
I can believe that.
You can only carry so much, and
true.
That transcends all generations of soldiers and warriors.
I'm sure that's true.
there are a lot of important things to have out there. Mail, chow, all those things, but dry socks, that's right at the top of the list. Always, still is. Thanks for sharing that. Jorge, have you had the opportunity to go to the Republic of Korea to visit South Korea?
No, I haven't.
Well, I would encourage you to. It's just, the pandemic has caused travel to be a little more complicated than it needs to be. But when there's an opportunity, I wish all of you, all three of you would, and your families would avail yourself of it. It's a beautiful country. They're a gracious and grateful people. And, what they've learned and what they've done from this horrible experience is just remarkable. It's a credit to the country, and it would warm your heart. I'm going to turn this back over to Steve to close out. I really just want to thank you, this distinguished panel, and for sharing your insights, for opening up your heart, for helping us better understand a time that, as we had mentioned earlier during our dialogue, kind of the forgotten war. Proudly, there is a Korean War Veterans Memorial on the mall, in the shadow of the Lincoln Monument. I think it's the most beautiful monument on the mall, certainly one of the most beautiful. And what you may or may not know is we're currently going through the process of adding to that memorial a wall of remembrance that will have all the names of those that were killed in action. Soldier, sailor, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardmen, Merchant Marines, and over 7,000 Katusa, Korean augmentation in the United States Army, that will be displayed. We've worked hard over the last 2 years to get the the design approved. It's a understated but powerful, and it's broken out by rank to show who really pays, who bears the brunt of war. It's the younger soldiers and it's the younger warriors that bear the brunt. But your participation in this panel adds to that. It enriches the legacy that we've inherited. And I can't thank all three of you enough for sharing your stories, your incredible stories. So God bless you. Thank you, Bob, Grandfield, Earl Goodall, and Jorge Mercado. And it was just an absolute honor to spend this last hour with you. And with that, Steve, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Sir, thank you. I think it's very important that free societies pause on significant days like today to reflect on and honor the veterans who answered their nation's call to defend freedom and a way of life for all the citizens. For Koreans and Americans, we can go one step further. We can go one step further because we fought together against the common enemy, and the actions of the brave men and women in uniform saved South Korea and a vital U.S. ally that has risen to become a world leader in so many areas. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to give you a quick update of upcoming events. If you know a Korean War veteran and would like to share their stories, please let us know by going to our website at kdva.vet. The KDVA Quarterly Journal will be published in English and in Korean, and in early July it will include stories about Korean War veterans and defense veterans. KDVA just started a new series with U.S. service members that asked them to tell us what they learned from their service in Korea. So please continue to look out for those stories. On the 28th of July, KDVA and our partner KUSEF will hold a major conference about the Alliance in Washington, D.C. Please look for invitations soon. And then finally, KDVA has been on a historic membership drive in 2021. We increased our membership by 22% in 2020, even during the pandemic. And this year, we are already on pace to at least double that. So please jump on board with us for free at kdva.vet. That's VET. So ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you very much. And we really look forward to working together for the ROC U.S. Alliance. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.